Let's talk about some height lerping. This is something that I've wanted to talk about for a while because it's some really cool stuff, and now that we have pretty much the most basic stuff down, let's do something exciting, and then we've got some more basic stuff to cover after this, don't get me wrong, but for now, let's do something exciting. Height lerping. What is height lerping? Well, it is lerping based on height. That's been the video. Thank you for watching. Okay, now let's get going with this. We're going to probably just use this material that I have right over here. If I can remember which one that is. It's the one that I use to show vertex colors. So let's stop doing this whole scrolling thing because we're not going to be using it anymore. And none of this we're going to be using anymore either. Don't mind all that stuff. If you haven't been following along with the series as a whole, it's not that important. So we've got these two little textures here and we're lerping them based on our vertex color red, right? We've covered that before, like this is all red and this is all not red, or the other way around. I don't remember right now. If we just apply this, it will stop scrolling as well, which will look a little bit better. But what if we have something like a maybe like a brick texture or like a tile texture or whatever, where we want like moss or grass coming through the cracks only, or the cracks first before also covering the bricks themselves. That is where height lerping comes in. Height lerp, I think I showed it off in an earlier video as an example of a material function, but we can just add in a height lerp node again. You can just reconstruct this yourself if you want to. You can look into how the math behind all this works and check out the material function itself here, but we're not going to do that. I'm just going to show you how it works. So we have two inputs, A and B. We have a transition phase, which is going to be in our case the vertex color, but you can do this with like a texture or whatever you want. Then we have a height texture, which is quite important, and some contrast for that height texture. The output will be the result of the lerped A and B based on the other things given in. But we also get a alpha out, so if you just want to use this as an alpha to put into your existing lerps, that's entirely possible. And we got a lerp alpha no contrast, so that's a softer version of the alpha. I'm going to show you with the height lerp A and B input first, and then I'm also going to show you with the alpha. So instead of using this lerp that we have right over here, let's get rid of this for the moment. What we're going to do is we're going to replace it with a height lerp. So input A is going to be texture grass, input B is going to be the texture for the dirt, and then the result is going to go into the base color. You will notice that it does throw an error because it does need a height texture. That is one of the required inputs. So let's just give this like a Perlin noise as a input for the height texture. And now we can see this is entirely 100% just grass, because of course the preview doesn't have any vertex painting. But if we just make this into a separate window real quick and we go into the third person example map, you will also note that I didn't put in the transition phase because I am an idiot. Let's put in the red vertex data. Now it's entirely brown because we don't have vertex colors. But if we go back here, that's more or less the exact same thing that we had before, isn't it? Well, it kind of is. But now we get to the interesting part, right? Because this cloud texture doesn't really do that well. Maybe if we add in the UVs here, maybe it'll make some difference. Not really. So if instead of using the vertex data colors, I don't know what happened there, we use just a scalar value here in the transition phase, I'll be able to show things off a little bit better. So if we set this to 0.5, for instance, we should be able to see that it's coming through with the other texture everywhere that the value is 0.5 or below. So if I set this entirely to a value of 1, you will now see that it's entirely the B input that we're working with. And that's all driven by the height texture. So if we had something that is a little bit more, do we have like a tiling texture or something like that? I guess we can use this widget grid vertex as an example, because it's got a lot more contrast to it naturally already. So now we can see like 0.5, everything that is below 0.5 is going to be texture sample A, And everything that's below 0.5 is literally just the black squares that we have here. And that's all going to be the grass. Everything that is over 0.5 is going to be input B, which is all of the lines here, which is our dirt texture. Now, if we go back to tiling noise and we add in a little bit of contrast here, so let's add like a contrast value of 3, so it's a little bit less soft. That makes this entire effect a little bit more noticeable. And if we convert this to a parameter, so we can actually change this in real time, we can see if I change this parameter around now, we can have this really nice like height lerping effect, where one material starts to like fade in based over the other material based on the noise texture that we have, which is really quite cool. Now, the issue with this is we have to do this for the base map, and then for the metallic map, and then for the roughness map, and for all the different maps, right? Which can be kind of annoying to hook up. So what we do instead is we actually can just use the normal lerp, and instead of using the result output here, we don't even need to supply any inputs for this. If we're doing it this way, we can just put our inputs through our normal lerp and then use the alpha output from our height lerp into the alpha of the usual lerp that we have here. And this way we can very easily also like lerp the normals, for instance. So let's set that up real quick. Let's make a little bit of room to set things up here. We'll keep the noise texture, that's fine. And then like copy these two over, and let's see, hopefully we just like have the grass normals and the sandstone normals as well. And we can very easily now also lerp these two in much the same way with just the same alpha outputs. Do make sure we use the same texture coordinate systems for them. Otherwise the normals aren't going to line up with the textures. That would be bad. But now, just as easily as that, we have a lerp that we can put into the normals. And now the normals of these materials, as well as the base color textures, will be driven by the same input, which again, for us right now, is just a parameter. So we have this parameter here. Let's apply this actually, so we actually see the normals. We can very slowly fade between the two, and it fades between the normal maps included as well. And of course, we're doing this with a parameter at the moment. Realistically, you'd probably do this a little bit more with a vertex color. So let's do that again, putting that into the transition phase. If we apply that, we can now see that we have this slightly more harsh edge due to the contrast we have in the height lerp. But if we go into mesh painting, and I set my paint to, instead of having a strength of 0.5, which is quite strong, if I set this to a strength of like 0.2, we might see there's a little bit more like smoothness to the way that this applies now, and it doesn't apply everywhere. So in some cases we just need to go over this a couple of times in order for this to actually take. Like we can make this apply everywhere. We can also set up a material where it will just refuse to lerp anything beyond a value of like 0.8, whatever, in the texture. It's a little bit more complicated, but we can do some really like neat stuff with this. So if we, for instance, go back to the grid here, that'll make that a little bit more noticeable. You'll be able to see that drawing this in now, we very easily draw in the little lines, but if we want to draw in the squares themselves, that takes a little bit more application. We can even set the strength even a little bit lower, so it's very clear that we can draw in the lines here a lot easier than the squares themselves. Like if we just keep drawing onto this, we will eventually start drawing onto the squares, but that just takes a lot more until we get to the value of 1, at which point it switches over to the other material. But for everything in between, the actual lines, any value that is like above 0 pretty much should give you the underlying material here. So that's how you can basically use the height lerp. Do excuse me if I mixed up the saying above a certain value or under a certain value at certain points to do with the transition phase. I get it mixed up in my head all the damn time, whether or not the transition phase is the value, like which direction the lerp works. And if I had to guess, you're also going to run into that issue because it's just like not particularly intuitive. And it's also not that relevant because when you notice something is wrong, you just swap things around or you start using a different vertex pane, like you start to subtract instead of add, and that ends up being fine. So just experiment with it a little bit and you will start developing some intuition for how this actually works. And for the full course, if you're watching this in the future, it should be all up on the YouTube channel already. But if you're watching this shortly after it was uploaded, there will be a link down below in the description to the Patreon where you can find the full course. And a very big thank you to all of my Patreons. You can see them on screen right now. If you want to help out supporting the channel, there's a link down below in the description to the Patreon page. And a special thanks to my Cave Digger tier Patreons, Sir J. Thomas,